Worst crime stories in the history of Africa. Human society has always had psychopaths, and Africa has been no exception to the seeming rise of criminals ranging from the all-known murderer of South Africa to the notorious armed robbers of West Africa. Some remain unsolved, their perpetrators walking among an unsuspecting population, and in today's episode, we will be unveiling the worst crime stories in the history of Africa, and this isn't rated with the number of deaths they left behind, but their known brutality. 1. The South African Strangler, the Gauteng Killer. Known as the Ted Bundy of South Africa, Moses Sithole was arguably the most dangerous and yet charming African serial killer. He was intelligent, polished, and psychopathic. To lure victims, he established a dummy organization called Youth Against Human Abuse, purportedly dedicated to eradicating child abuse. He would then invite applications from women for various positions. Answering the call was the first mistake because the mild-mannered, smartly dressed executive was not what he seemed. After the interview, Sithole would lead his victims through an open field where he would then attack them, drag them away from sight, rape them, and strangle them with their own underwear. He then carved the word bitch on their corpses. Sometimes, he would call the victims' families to taunt them. The murders became widely known as the ABC murders. They attracted national attention, forcing even President Mandela to personally appeal for public assistance. Sithole's spree ended when a witness confessed to having seen Sithole with one of the victims. When he realized he had been made, Sithole disappeared. He reappeared in October 1995 when he made a call to journalist Tamsin de Beer. In characteristic psychopathic pride, he claimed 76 victims and gave directions for a body that had not been found. He was later arrested with 3 bullets in his body on the street of Johannesburg. During his trial, Sithole claimed that he had killed women because they reminded him of the women who had falsely accused him of rape. He was found guilty with a possibility of parole after 930 years. 2. Anini, the Law. For those who grew up in the 80s in West Africa, Nigeria, to be exact, the name Lawrence Nomani Bananini can never be forgotten as one of Nigeria's most notorious armed robbers who reigned supreme in the old Bendel state, now Edo and Delta. In 1993, Anini and his gang members robbed 12 banks in one day and killed 18 people. Lawrence Anini and his squad of robbers made it a point of duty to rob banks in broad daylight. Their level of confidence was so high that they went about throwing money at the market women in order to gain popularity. Spearheading a reign of terror that reached a crescendo between August and December 1986, he killed at will, robbed, raped, and kidnapped, daring the top echelon of the police force by attacking the convoy of a police commissioner and an assistant inspector general of police. His reign of terror forced The Guardian Nigeria to ask in one of its editorials, will they ever find Anini, the Law? He particularly enjoyed wearing impeccably tailored suits. A spendthrift and womanizer, but there was also a hidden coward in him. For that reason, to bolster his courage, he took refuge in alcohol, marijuana, and a lot of voodoo, which all inspired the beast in him. When he was finally captured in December 1986, the cover of This Week magazine ran a picture of the badly injured Anini in his hospital bed with the headline Anini, face to face with the law, and he was publicly executed by firing squad. However, nobody believed it despite his voodoos, and its act left a stigma on his family 35 years after his death. His kids reported being labeled as sons of criminals whenever they walked on the street. 3. Kumasi Strangler. In February of 2000, a 36-year-old man called Charles Kwanzaa was arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, Joyce Boateng. An additional murder charge was added a few days later, that of a hairdresser, called Akua Sirwa. Sirwa's body was found near Kumasi Sports Stadium on January 19, 1996. The names on Kwanzaa's charge sheet kept increasing, and he was finally accused of killing 34 women. All the victims had been found lying in supine positions with their legs widely opened. There was clear evidence of rape, including a discarded condom near the victim's body. It perhaps fit too well that the Ghanaian mechanic had a history. In 1986, Kwanzaa was jailed for rape. After his release, he raped another woman and was jailed again. The story of the Kumasi rapist seemed to have finally ended with the apprehension of a man who had a history and motives to kill. But that was not the end. There were 21 murders of young women in and around Accra in 1999. 4 more were killed in the first half of 2000, with 2 of them being found within 1 week of each other and outside Matahiko, the primary dumping site of most of the first murders. The most damning evidence that Kwanzaa was most likely not the killer was that the killings continued after his arrest. By December 2000, the murders had reached a total of 31. Being an election year, the serial murders became a primary political issue, leading to the voting out of the Interior Minister and his deputy. For Kwanzaa, only 3 of the charges seemed to have anything to do with him. The real serial killers were never known. 4. Haj Mohammed Meshoui, the murderer of Marrakesh. Haj Mohammed Meshoui, also known as the Moroccan serial killer, was a shoemaker by profession who had his own little shop in the center of Marrakesh. At the beginning of the 1900s, Marrakesh was seen as the epicenter for trading within the African continent. Therefore, many traders as well as foreigners came and went all the time, making it very difficult for the local guards to follow up with the rising crime rate. In 1902, 10 women had disappeared from the city overnight with no trace left behind, and the community always thought that they were being kidnapped by travelers or even traders that came to Marrakesh. Messi was well acquainted with most of the locals as he was one of the few shoemakers at the time. However, they never liked him as he seemed mysterious, as if he was hiding something. Aided by a 70-year-old female accomplice named Rahali, Meshoui drugged and killed at least 36 women. 26 bodies were found buried under his shop, while the other 10 were under a different property he owned. Like the murderous sisters in Egypt, the serial killer robbed his victims after he killed them and then buried their bodies. The intriguing story of his execution begins with a sentence for crucifixion on May 2, 1906. The method of punishment was considered too brutal by foreign diplomats in Morocco, and the government caved in, instead sentencing him to immurement. He was buried alive on June 11, 1906, and died 2 days later. 5. David Thabo Simlane, Swaziland's first known serial killer. David Simlane is a Swazi serial killer who caused havoc from the late 1990s until late 2001. His murder spree began in 1997, around the time he was released from prison for a prior conviction of rape. It was one of the many times, about 18, since 1976, that he had been convicted of robbery and rape. The last conviction was significant because he would later claim that he had robbed the woman but never raped her. For him, the 28 women and children he would later kill were revenge for the wrongful conviction. Simlane lured most of his victims to the woods of Malkerns with job prospects, where he would then kill and bury them in shallow graves. He seemed to have had an accomplice called Vilakati on whose farm the first 6 bodies were uncovered in July 2000. 2 Mozambicans he hired to dig the graves tipped off the police, who then launched a manhunt for Vilakati. They found him 8 months later and chased him through a maize field before they shot him dead. After his arrest, Simlane led the police to shallow graves in Manzini. Simlane was found guilty of a total of 28 murders and acquitted of 6. He was sentenced to death in 2011, 7 years after his trial began. A total of 83 witnesses testified against him. He claimed that he had been tortured and coerced to confess to the murders. Year after year, we hear stories of horrific crimes worldwide, not just in Africa. Crime is a constant epidemic that ravages society, cripples development, and forms a constant threat to freedom and the very essence of the existence of humanity. Say no to crime. As we end today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe for more informative and educative videos. Thanks for watching.